So a bit of local knowledge goes into actually preparing a nice looking offer to the seller. So a buyer may want to talk with their agents and say, well, what normally happens in our community in a purchase and sale, so you can make your contract look standard. Or you may want to make it simple for the seller. If you're buying at a good deal at a cash price, you don't want them to have to think about how much each one of these things cost. You might just offer $2,000 less and bear all the costs yourself, or whatever you project the costs to be. So given the negotiation aspect of it, or the presentation aspect of it, is something you may want to discuss with your agent. Let's just take a look at some of these provisions. So the natural hazard zone disclosure report can be ordered. I think just the way I get them from Title, I believe Title owns, the different title companies own a lot of these reports. They're not usually expensive, but you might want to check with escrow and find out what the costs usually are. They'll usually be able to tell you, oh, it's $75 or $90. Some other reports may get more expensive. I sometimes have asked for a clue report. Some agents now believe that providers don't provide clue reports anymore. I found that some still do as of when I'm making this video, but you can always check, and a clue report can let buyers know if insurance claims have been made against the property. Now here, there's just some, well, an issue that always comes up is the hot water heater retrofit. Sellers have to do it. I believe that it has to be done before closing, as do this carbon monoxide detector device installation. Lenders like to see it, so if your buyer is using a loan, these things have to be done. And I think normally you would see, and it may change in your jurisdiction, but I normally see sellers having to pay for the carbon monoxide device installation, and you can put in portable ones that just plug in, and the water heating bracing. And there may be other local requirements and other requirements that apply to your property. Now, sometimes if these numbers are an issue, you may want to talk to escrow or your agent and have these costs estimated ahead of time as you're preparing your offer or accepting an offer. Escrow and title, I frequently see buyer and seller shall pay escrow fee 50-50 in San Diego. Of course, it's negotiable, and it may be different in your locality. Escrow holder shall be. Now again, I was going to say I like to see escrow companies that are part of a big title company. I think you may want to work as a buyer or seller. A lot of agents like to work with their in-house escrow companies because there's many reasons for that. As a buyer or seller on the other side of that situation, you may want to talk to your agent and say, hey, should we just cooperate here, or is it important that we go to an escrow company that we have confidence in, that we've worked with before? The lawyer and the negotiator with me says, I like to work with places that have worked with me before because I generally get deals done more smoothly. If there's an issue, sometimes they just don't worry about it. So picking escrow and title is something you should discuss with your agent. Now, we'll frequently see that the seller shall pay owner's title, but the owner's title policy shall be, and the owner's policy shall be issued by. Now, the different title and companies have pretty standard reports, and then they sometimes have reports that cover a little bit more that they may throw in, or they may charge more. That's something buyers may want to look into. And sometimes title prices are negotiable. So price-sensitive buyers and sellers might want to do all that work ahead of time. And then finally, buyer shall pay for any title insurance policy insuring buyer's lender unless otherwise agreed in writing. So you might see a normal breakdown: seller pays and then buyer pays for this, but again, it's negotiable. Section D, other costs. Now, sometimes you'll just see X right straight down through most of these. Other times they'll be negotiated back and forth. Again, it may be a locality thing. It may also be a presentation thing. And frequently, you might not run into these transfer tax fees. So if your agent knows this ahead of time, or you do, you might say, I'll absorb it, making it look like you're either well-informed buyer, strong buyer. It can look good if you're not being ticky-tacky. If you don't know, you might just say seller shall pay. Seller shall pay HOA processing fees. By law, the seller is supposed to absorb some of these HOA fees per the civil code. Now, I have the civil code section here for anyone who would like to read it. What happened there? I'm not used to it splitting in half like that. Okay, so let's see if it's in the hour. Yeah, so I'll scroll up and scroll down for people who want to stop and pause and look through this. You know what? I'm also going to just copy this here, and I'll put it over here in the section of the website that deals with this. So I'll say link to HOA code, link to HOA code, and that should give people enough time to read it. In short, the HOA is supposed to provide a document that gives buyers an understanding of what they may be buying into. For instance, if there's a big assessment coming, or the minutes from the last year to see what the HOA is contemplating in terms of maybe changing their fees. So it's designed to give buyers a heads up if they actually read the document. Now, I lived in some of the right before the big short sale crisis, when there was a frenzy and there was lots of building. Builders were like, hey, I'm providing, prices are going up so fast, I'd like to get in on some of this. So they were leaving like 0.5% or percent transfer fees that would go back to the builders, who then eventually, I think they realized that this was a bit onerous, so they started making it into charities. So these fees can be annoyingly large. Not massive, well, maybe massive, but they can be $500, $600, $700, $800, $400, $500, $600, $800, and what I've seen, depending on the price of the sale. But they could be more. So, if you don't know about this, you'd say seller shall pay for it. If I don't know, I actually would probably advise most people to do it unless they know for sure there's no private transfer fee. If it's a newer development, it's something you should definitely look out for. Especially with some companies, they did some of those things frequently throughout the state of California. So be careful on this one, and look into it. For a while, lawyers believe that you could get out of paying it. And then after a while, I think the feeling is that they're pretty solid. I've also seen transfers happen where I thought there was supposed to be a private transfer fee and it never happened. And a year later, the private transfer fee was on the closing. So maybe title doesn't know about it all the time. Maybe the homeowners or associations enforce it sometimes, and sometimes they don't. But it's an interesting item that buyer and seller should be aware of. Now, unless you're buying a fixer-upper and you already know you're going to do a lot of work, I would think most buyers would want to buy this homeowner's insurance. Now, it's nice to have a lawyer on your team, because I know I've had to help people collect on these things, because, we'll put it this way, my own home that I purchased a home that was 40 years old, and the pipes broke. Some of the pipes broke within a few months of my moving in, and when I called the company, they gave me a little bit of time, and I said, I'm an attorney, and I'm also a realtor. And they go, oh, you're a realtor? And all of a sudden, they agreed to send people out, and they paid for some of the costs, not all of the costs of the repair. But nevertheless, it was useful, and I do know they pay up on warranties for like washing machines sometimes. So it gives the seller a nice peace of mind, gives the buyer a really nice peace of mind that some of the common issues that they may walk into after a closing will be covered for the period of time that they have their warranty for, which is usually about a year. And here we just talk about who's going to pay for it. It's good to get that price ahead of time. I don't even remember why, but at one point we might have put in like $500 or $550, but then the buyer also wanted the pool covered, and it was, and he was willing to pay for the difference, but the lender, for some reason, it caused an issue. So it's good to nail that number down pretty quickly, pretty early in my experience. And then here's where a buyer could waive the home warranty.